Hello everyone. Yes, so I intend that this will be more like a walkthrough of the assignments we were given in the last microeconomics class. And what we asked to do is actually to compress the number of sectors we have in this particular input output table, like the one open right now. And we have 41 sectors. This output table, if you just scroll down, the first activity sector here is crop production. Then you could just scroll down to you discover that we actually have 41 sectors here, right, up to broadcasting. And so what we are going to do is to compress the sectors into n numbers, right? So depending on the numbers of letters you have in your first name. So for instance, now mine will be 8 sectors. So and but I won't be doing 8 sectors in this video. I'll just do like a demo just to give us an idea of what to do, and it's not something difficult, right? So the first thing you want to do is walk through the sectors and see how you could categorize them. So for instance, crop production, livestock, forestry, fishing, you could put them under a sector, right? Agricultural sector. And I got um, this kind of categorization from NBS agriculture. You have this, so you could just put crop production, livestock, forestry, fishing under agriculture. You could decide to create a sector for mine and quarrying, right? And that sector for manufacturing, different sectors all together, and it will be fine. So, but for this particular video, I'll just assume we are creating 4 sectors, right? Or 4 groups rather, right? So, and I'll just walk through how that will be done. Okay, so what we need to do first of all is create a new file. It's important that you create a new file because you don't want to edit the original like document, and you want something you can always go back to check with. And so first we create a new file. Let me just do that. Right, then we can copy what we have here from this old file. Just control A, copy everything, or click on this icon just to highlight this. Just control C to copy, then paste in your new document. But when you want to paste, I'll actually advise that you paste as text, like paste just the values alone. Paste just the values alone so that you have something like this. The reason being that the old sheets, let me go back to the old sheet. Um, if you observe, actually has some formulas there. So for instance, the domestic intermediate inputs, if you click on this, you discover that it's actually summing all you have in the first column, like for crop production across those sectors. So the sum of that is what you have under this place, domestic intermediate input, and same thing to here. So if you are trying to compress and create sectors in between, the values here will be changing. So just control copy this and paste as values, right, in this particular table. So this is what we just created, right? So once you do this, then your work can then begin. So in my case, we are working with 4 groups. We want to create 4 groups, and there are 41 sectors. So I will just do this randomly. This is not what you should do. What you should do is categorize sectors that are related. So, but in my case, just to make things simple and fast, I have 41 sectors. So I'll put the first 10 sectors under group one, put the second 10 sectors under group two, the third 10 sectors under group three, then the remaining 11 sectors, I'll put them in group four, right? And another thing you should notice is that you have 41 sectors, right, across the rows, and same thing too across the columns, right? 41 sectors across the columns, and you are going to group them across both rows and columns. So let's just look at the first 10 sectors here. So I'm going to be summing everything we have for these first 10 sectors and putting a value here. So what I can do first is after this 10 sector, this is where I want to introduce a break. I can insert a new line here, right, and call this group one, right? Maybe I should make it bold too so that it's kind of like obvious. So group one, and I can do something similar. So this is the first 10 sectors that I'll categorize it and put their values here, the sum of this. I'll use an Excel formula to do that. Right, for the next 10 sectors, 11 to 20, so I can create a new line here, insert, right, and I call this group 2, and I can make this bold too. Right, then the next 10 sectors, that's from 21 to 30, insert, I call it group 3, and the last 10 sectors, insert this, I call this group 4. Right, so these are the sectors I'm trying to create. In your case, of course, it's not group 1 you'll be doing. In your case, you might want to create, let's say, assume you are grouping these first 4 sectors, you might want to introduce a line here and say, okay, now this one is agriculture. So, and it's going to be a sum of these first 3 items. So, but for my own example here, I'll just take that out. So I'm just looking at 4 groups and I'm just giving them a random name, group 1, group 2, like that. Okay, so I've done the more like splitting across the rows. I'll do the same thing across the column. So um I'm going to come here, insert a new column here, group 1, right? Make it bold so that it stands out. Right, do the same thing up to from 11 right to 20, so I can insert another one here, group 2. So what we are doing now is what you're going to do in your own case. So but what you should be trying to do is, I'm sorry, what you should be trying to do is think around the number of letters in your name, right, and how you are going to divide accordingly. So you might want to make reference to this and just this already gives you an idea of related sectors, right, and see how you can merge all of the 41 sectors into your own more like groups that you'll be creating. All right, so created out of group 2, then I can insert another column here, um, group 3, call that group 3, make it bold. All right, then finally at the end of this, I insert the last one, group 4. Right. All right, so that's what we've got now. That's what we got now. And the next thing will be the next thing that will be done will be to sum up, because we are more like compressing. So everything I have here: crop production, livestock, forestry, fishing, crude petroleum, natural gas, up to food, drink, and beverages. I'll be putting them together in group 1. So using the formula equal to sum, open brackets, then I'm summing from this, right? The first to 11th. I'm summing from E5 row column E, right, row 6, sorry, from E6, not E5, from E6, that's from this particular point to E15, right? So this is what I'm summing, and so I put the answer. This is the new value now I'll be carrying, right, for group 1. Could have been agriculture or something else, but I'm just leaving at group 1. That will just keep things simple. And the next thing I'll just do is apply using this fill handle, right? Once you're on Excel, this once it's showing this particular arrow, No, there are different arrows. Look at the arrow is showing me now. It's different from what it is going to be showing me here. And now this is more like they call it fill undo. So once you have this, just click on this and drag across. So I'm going to be summing across board. That's what you want to do. And it has calculated those sums already. Now same thing is what you would do for group 2. Sum what you have here. All right. Then apply this across board. So you've done that for group 2. The next thing you'll be doing is for group 3. Sum. You have to use equal to first before summing. Very important. Then you open brackets. Of course, you could close the bracket. If you don't, Excel will close it for you. Equals to run or enter rather. And then you drag across board. So, and then finally for the last group, um, do this, then you run through. So now we've done this for the rows, right? So same thing, we're also going to aggregate across the columns. So you want to do this for crop for group 1 here. So this group 1, no, we're actually summing everything we have from 1 to 10. So you want to sum these values, and put the answer in here. So this will be sum, and you're summing from here all the way down, right? E6 to N6, and this. Now you drag down. Now I'm going to drag down to this point. I want you to just observe something. This particular place, the one below 215,574.6, already has a formula, like it's summing everything you have across. Like if I just tap on this now, you see this formula is summing from 06 to 015, because we already implied a formula here and just like drag through, right? So but once you are doing it this way downwards, you don't need to bother about stopping. You can just drag through, because just take a look. Once I drag through, let's assume I just put this and I drag through, it doesn't change this value. I'm still going to have 215,540 and 574.6. Just observe. So it doesn't change that. So you could just drag through to the very end and you're fine, right? And that's what you actually want to do. And same thing, you come for group 2. Notice I'm starting from here, not here, because if you do this sum, let's assume you're summing from this point. Of course, this just summing this activity sector's code, like, and which does not make sense, kind of. So you don't want to do that. You want to sum from this point. You want to sum the values across the sector. So for textiles, wood, paper, up to electricity, right? Pertaining to the first sector, you do this and you drag down. Okay, so we've done that for group 2. Then it comes to group 3, you do the same thing, and then you drag down. So and then finally you get it done for group 4. You get it done for group 4 and drag down. Okay, so that being done, we've already created groups. In this case, 4 groups containing all of the 41 sectors. The first group has 10, second group, third group have 10 sectors, then the last group has 11 sectors, right? And of course, it's not compulsory you divide equally, right? For instance, you could have 4 sectors in agric, you could have another, say, 9 sectors in manufacturing, have another one, but what's guiding your choices, the number of letters you have in your name. So if somebody has 41 letters in his name, for instance, then you are just returning this same input output table, because you're not having to create groups now, right? So now that we've done this, what I'll be doing next is to create a new sheet, because we want to delete these sectors now that we've been able to group together. But if you delete it straight, you will notice what will happen with this. An error will occur because this value now, or this cell, depends on these values. So if you delete what you have here, then it means you cannot get this value. Let me just do that for instance. Now it has brought an error, reference not found. So let's just go back, Control Z. So what you want to do is you want to create a new sheet, right? Sheet 2. You could name it, call it anything, but let's just leave it as sheet 2. Right, then copy everything you have here. Just once you click on this, copy it, then come and paste it in this new sheet. But now paste as values, right? Just values alone. Values alone. So now this is the sum we had before. Now you notice that this thing is actually carrying the value, so that if I delete this now, it's no longer affecting the values of my group 1, right? So what you're going to do is now deleting those sectors now that we've merged. We've merged all of these sectors. So just delete that. Then I delete 20 to 30, right? The values ID contained in group 3, we've created some, so you can delete that. Also delete what you have here, and you're good. So now for your rows, you've trimmed it down to just 4 sectors, was just as I wanted to do before. Of course, you can always expand this row so that you're seeing, or this column rather, so you can see the values properly. Then here too, I also delete all these other sectors that I've merged. Of course, I'm not deleting group 1, so I just delete the first 10. I did have the values merge in group 1. I delete this next 10 too. All right, and then I also delete this. All right, then finally I delete this last 11 sectors. And so now my input output table has been effectively reduced to just this. Before I had 41 sectors, right, row and column, but now I have just 4 sectors. And this is your input output table. This is your input output table. So I think with this one is actually fine, and you've done the assignment already. Yeah, you've done the assignment already. But by way of extension, let me just add some things just for knowledge sake. I don't think this is part of the assignment, but for knowledge sake, just to understand what this input output table is saying, at least for my own learning and experience working with the assignment. So let me just create another sheet to illustrate what I want to do, right? And then this, I'll copy this, then paste it here. Okay, now the illustration I was trying to show is what exactly is this input output table saying. Basically, it's just telling you kind of like the intersectoral trade, right? Intra and intersectoral trade between the different sectors. Now, in this case, group 1 is my sector, group 2, group 3, group 4 are the sectors I have. So what this is telling is that the trade between group 1 and group 1, right, is this. So group 1 is more like demanding some of its inputs, raw materials, from itself. So just look at agriculture. Let's assume group 1 was agriculture. So a particular division in agriculture, right, might need inputs that are also from that sector. So perhaps you talk of seeds, for instance, you get the seed from a farmer. So for a farmer to plant it, he needs to get the seed from another farmer. And then this is a trade between group 1 and group 2. And so you just have it across board like that. Now, what you have here, you recall at the beginning, I was saying something about the domestic intermediate input being a sum of what you have for group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4, right? So this stuff, rather than just having, you could have empty lines here. Let's assume you even had empty lines here. You could get these values by just using the formula sum, right? So it's actually a sum of this stuff here that will gives you this value. That will give you this value. And you could drag this. Now you notice that I'm dragging, it's not going to change anything, right? Because These values have been calculated already from the initial table that we were given in class. Let me go back to the initial table. From the initial table we were given in class, these formulas have already been applied. All right, so they are true. And when we sum, it didn't change anything. All right, so just drag this. Although this would not effectively, it's not changing any of your values. You discover that I've dragged through and I'm still getting the same value. So and even I just stopped at this sheet 2 that we are done, I'm fine. I still have the input output table. But just so that we just understand what is happening, let me just walk through this and I'll complete this in few minutes. Right, then next is your non-competitive imports, right? Intermediate import. So there's no formula to this, it's just giving us that. Now your total intermediate imports or inputs rather, as you might guess, will be the domestic inputs, right? And the domestic intermediate input and the imported intermediate input. So this will be simply be the sum of these two guys, right? The domestic and the imported. And that's what you have here. If I drag to, you discover it's not going to change this because these values are true. And then that's what you have here for the total intermediate imports, right? Or inputs rather. Now, compensation to employees, consumption of fixed capital, these are all given. They are all given. Your value added at current basic price is the sum of these three. So yeah, you could just rather than just having the values displayed, if this were blank spaces, you could something you could calculate equals to sum is the sum of these first three items, compensation of employees. That's what will give you value added at current basic prices, and you could drag through as usual, not changing anything because the formulas are true. Now, these other points, indirect taxes they are giving, less subsidies they are giving as well, and your value added at current producer prices is simply your value added at basic prices, right? Plus, like note I'm including a plus here, plus indirect taxes, then minus your lesson subsidies, right? So that's E16 plus E17 minus E18. Enter. That gives you this, and I can drag through. Doesn't change anything. So that's it. Now, what's your gross input? Your gross input will be equal to the total intermediate input plus what was the value added at current producer prices. So enter, and that's what you have here. So this, if I drag through, this is the input. This is the input. Now, how do you get the outputs? You get the outputs on this column. You get the output on this column. First, you get the output from the intermediate sales, right? And how do you get this intermediate sales? You are summing across. So what you have here is the sum of everything you have here. If I put equals to sum, right? Now I'm summing everything I have from E6 up to H6. Now C gives that same value that we had before. If I drag down, nothing changes, it's still the same value. I'm summing across, right? And of course I've just stopped here because this is also summing through. So nothing is changing. The sum you have here, right? If you sum all of this, you get more than 2,000. I'm sorry, this 1,024,016. If you sum across this way, you get the same value, right? So that's just what it is. Then government consumption, just like government expenditure is given, private consumption C, investment I, export, import. So now what is demand? Right? Demand normally as we know is your C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Right? So your final demand is more like the sum of what you have here: government, consumption, investment, exports. But now you now have to subtract minus your imports, right? The import is N6. So I'm summing from J6 to M6 and I'm removing N6. Right, that gives demand. And if you drag down for group 1, group 2, 4, you get the same value. Now, and what is your gross output? Your gross output will be equal to this inter sales plus the final demand. Final demand is 06, 06. Right, that's the final demand. Enter. And if you drag down, you get this. So now what you're seeing is that your total output now, right? Total output is the same as what you have here. Or in fact, you look at it this way: the output, the gross output from group one is same as the gross input from group two, from group one rather. The gross output from group two is same as the gross input from group two. And that's what you want to have. The gross output and gross input must be the same, right? What we did next was to try to like copy this, right? Let me paste as text first. Then now imagine I'm copying this and I'm now transposing. I transpose this, so I can delete this now. And of course, you don't even need this stuff. You don't need this. Now I have my gross output and gross inputs together. I could just let's delete this line. It's duplicated. I could just say, okay, now I want to take a difference between my gross output and gross input. I expect them to be equal, and if they are equal, the difference should be zero, right? And when I run this is 0.00, so it's almost like the same. And if I run this across, I'm seeing that on like very very closely, the gross output is equal to the gross input, and of course, it's not going to be perfect due to like statistical discrepancies and error. But that's just the idea of the input output table showing this intersectoral linkage and that. So this is what you have, right? If you decide to apply the formulas, but if you just stop at what I had done a while ago, you have this. Of course, you can delete this. You don't need this in your input output table, right? So I think that's all. Thanks for taking time to go through this.